At my daughter-in-law's grand opening, I walked in with a $310,000 cashier's check in a bakery box tied with string. When I asked where my name was on the founder's plaque, she looked at my hands and said, "The investors are photographing the front. You'll photograph better in the back." My son stood 4 feet away with a champagne flute and didn't say one word. She handed me a hairnet and a lanyard that said, "Staff back entrance only." 2 weeks later, one signature closed her doors, and she never saw it coming. Welcome in, friend. Sit down and stay a while. Tell me in the comments what town you're watching from, what state, what country. I read every single one of them, and some nights they're the best company I've got. Before we start, I'll say plainly that parts of this story have been shaped for the telling. The names are invented. What it leaves sitting in your chest afterward is not. My name is Walter Serrano, 68 years old, and for 41 of those years I got up at 3 in the morning to make bread for people in Cleveland who never knew my last name and didn't need to. Baker's hands don't look like anything special. Mine are wide and flat, with burn scars along the knuckles, from 60,000 mornings of reaching into a deck oven, half asleep. My fingernails never came all the way clean. Rosa used to say she could find me in a dark room by smell alone, flour, yeast, scorched sugar, and the particular smell of a man who's been standing up since before the birds. Rosa. That's where any honest version of this has to start. She died 4 years ago in March, on a Tuesday, which struck me as unfair because Tuesday was our slow day and the only morning of the week we ever ate breakfast sitting down. 43 years, we were married. She ran the front counter and I ran the back. And if you'd asked either of us who the boss was, we'd have both pointed at her. The morning of the grand opening, I stood in the bathroom with a razor in my hand, longer than a man my age has any business standing in front of a mirror. I'd bought a new shirt, gray, collared, the kind you button all the way up. Kendra had sent a text 3 days before that said, "Neutral tones only, please. We're going for editorial." I didn't know what editorial meant. I bought gray and hoped it counted. "How's it look?" I asked the empty room. I've done that since the funeral. 4 years of talking to nobody. And the strange part is she keeps answering not out loud, but in the way the light comes through the kitchen window at a certain hour, or the way I'll reach for the salt and find it already moved to where I need it because I moved it there myself and forgot. I picked up her photograph off the dresser. 4th of July, sometime in the 90s, her holding a paper plate and laughing at something my brother said. That was Rosa, always the first one in the room to find the joke. "Big day, Rosita," I told her. "Marcus's wife opens her place today." We did it. Then I took the box out of the closet. It was a plain white bakery box, the same kind I'd folded 10,000 of, and inside it was a cashier's check for $310,000. I'd tied it with baker's string the way I used to tie a birthday cake, because I wanted the handing of it to feel like something. I'd counted the amount 3 times over 3 days. Old habit. When you grow up in a house where the milk money got counted twice, you never fully stop. $310,000. That was the sale of Serrano's Bakery on Warren Road, minus the taxes, plus about half of everything I'd put away in 41 years of not taking vacations. The drive from my house to the new place took 11 minutes. I could have done it blindfolded. The building she'd leased sat on the corner of Detroit and 9th, in a strip that had been dying since the 80s and was now, according to everybody with an opinion, coming back. It had good bones. 14-foot ceilings, a tin cornice, and a back wall of original brick that some architect had charged $9,000 to expose, which struck me as funny since I could have exposed it with a hammer and a Saturday. But mostly it had good bones, because I'd spent 7 months in it. I want you to understand what that means, friend, because everything that comes after depends on it. When Marcus and Kendra signed that lease, the space was a shell. No hoods, no drains, no 3-phase power. I was 67 years old, and I was in there 5 days a week for 7 months. I pulled the old drop ceiling down myself. I laid out the kitchen the way you lay out a kitchen when you've actually worked in one proof box near the mixer, cooling racks out of the traffic lane, a landing shelf beside the oven so nobody's carrying a hot sheet pan, 3 steps looking for somewhere to set it down. I brought my own tools. I brought my own knowledge, which is worth more, and I gave it away free. I hired the plumber I'd used for 30 years, and he cut me a price he wouldn't have cut a stranger. I stood over the electrician while he ran the conduit because I know exactly how a mixer draws under load. I built the back shelving out of maple I bought myself. I refinished the front counter, 22 feet of it by hand, 4 grits, on my knees, over 2 weekends, while Kendra took photographs of it in progress and posted them with captions like watching a dream take shape. My hands are in some of those photographs. Just the hands. You'd never know whose. I pulled up at 8:40 that morning, an hour before the ribbon, because I'd been asked to come early. Not invited early. Asked. She met me at the front door in a cream-colored dress with her hair pinned up and a photographer already circling behind her. "You're here," she said. She looked at the bakery box under my arm and did not ask about it. "The mixer's making a noise. Can you look at it before people come?" "No, good morning." "No, can you believe this day?" "No, we couldn't have done this without you." I went and looked at the mixer. It was fine. Somebody had loaded a double batch of brioche into a machine rated for single and the gearbox was telling them about it, the way gearboxes do. I pulled half the dough, ran it out, wiped the bowl, and put the whole thing right in about 6 minutes. I was still wiping my hands on a towel from my own kitchen when I heard small sneakers on the concrete. "Grandpa Walt!" Nora came around the corner at a dead run in a yellow dress with a cardigan buttoned wrong. 8 years old, arms already out. She hit me around the middle hard enough that I had to catch the counter. "Hey, sweetheart, are you going to be here the whole time?" She looked up at me with those serious brown eyes she got from her grandmother and from nobody else. "The whole entire time?" "That's the plan," I told her. She grinned and ran off toward the front, and I stood there in that kitchen I had laid out with my own 2 hands, holding a dish towel, listening to her sneakers get farther away, and I felt about as good as I'd felt in 4 years. I want to be honest with you about how I got here, because if I skip it, you'll spend this whole story wondering what kind of fool gives away $310,000. I've wondered myself. It started with a dinner in the fall, about 2.5 years back. Marcus called on a Thursday and said he wanted to talk about something important, and my stomach did that small, quiet drop it always did when he started a sentence that way. He's 42 now, commercial real estate. He does well by most measures, and not as well as he needs people to think. They came to my house. Kendra came inside my house for the first time in maybe 2 years, and she brought a lemon cake from a grocery store and called me Dad 4 times before she got her coat off. She'd never once called me that before. I let it pass. She sat at my kitchen table and laid out a folder with actual tabs in it. Build out estimates. Equipment quotes. First-year projections. A page of what she called brand positioning that I didn't understand and didn't say so. "The concept is, your bakery," she said, leaning in with both hands flat on my table. "But elevated. We keep the heritage, and we bring it into the now." Marcus was looking at the salt shaker. "If you sell Warren Road," she said, "the capital gets us open with a runway. And Dad will pay you back. Every dollar. I promise you that." I looked at my son. He didn't look up. "We'll put it in writing," I said. Something moved across Kendra's face for about 1/4 of a second. It wasn't gratitude. Then she smiled and said, "Of course, whatever makes you comfortable." That week, I called Ruth Feingold. Ruth had been my attorney since 1994. She'd handled the Bakeries Incorporation, Rose's estate, and one dispute with a landlord that I won, because Ruth doesn't lose. She's 71 now, and she still comes into the office 5 days a week because, in her words, golf is for people who've given up. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which meant she was already 3 moves ahead. "Walter," she said, "I want to be very clear with you about what we're building here. This is not a gift. This is a secured loan and a personal guarantee, and those are 2 different animals living in the same barn." "She's family, Ruth." "She's a borrower," Ruth said. "Family is what you call her at Thanksgiving. On paper, she's a borrower." She took her glasses off. "Sign it anyway. Sign it properly. If everything goes the way you hope, the paper never matters. And if it doesn't, the paper is the only friend you'll have left." So we papered it. A promissory note for $240,000 as a loan to the LLC, secured by the equipment. The other 70 went in as what Ruth called a capital contribution and what I called walking around money for a young business. And there was one more document. and I want you to remember it, because it's the whole hinge of this thing. The landlord wouldn't give a 10-year commercial lease on Detroit Avenue to a 2-year-old LLC with no operating history. Nobody would. So the landlord required a personal guarantee from someone with assets and a credit history going back to the Ford administration. That was me. I signed as personal guarantor on the lease. And Ruth, because she is who she is, negotiated one small clause into it that nobody in that room paid much attention to at the time. The guarantee was tied to me by name, it renewed with the lease's 5-year option, and it could be withdrawn by the guarantor upon written notice, with a 30-day cure period for the tenant to substitute security. Ruth wrote that clause. Kendra's attorney initialed it in about 4 seconds because he had a plane to catch. Then came the 7 months. I was there for all of them. I ate a lot of gas station sandwiches. I skipped a shoulder MRI I'd been putting off since Rosa died, and then kept putting off because the copay was $400 and I had a walk-in cooler to get leveled. I sold Rosa's car, a maroon Buick, with 19,000 miles on it, because she only ever drove it to Mass and to Giant Eagle, and I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes afterward, with both hands on my knees, not going anywhere. And through all of it, I told myself the same thing every man in my position tells himself. This is the one. This is the thing that finally puts me in the room. Now let me take you back to the ribbon. By 9:30, the sidewalk out front was full. Kendra had done well. She'd gotten a councilman, 2 people from a food magazine, a woman with a camera crew, and about 90 guests in what I now understand were neutral tones. There were flowers on every table. There was a harpist, an actual harpist, in a bakery at 10 in the morning. I came out of the kitchen with the box under my arm and I made my way toward the front, and that's when I saw the plaque. It was mounted beside the door on the exposed brick, brass on walnut, about the size of a cutting board. It said the name of her business, and underneath it, in letters you could read from the sidewalk, founded by Kendra Serrano, with the support of the Halloran family. The Hallorans are her parents, Dennis and Priscilla. Dennis sold industrial insurance for 30 years and has a boat. They had come to the build-out site exactly one time, in April, for 11 minutes, and Priscilla had asked whether the floor was going to stay that color. They had not put in $1, not one. I knew that with certainty, because I'd written every check, and Ruth had copies of all of them. I stood in front of that plaque with a bakery box under my arm, and I read it 4 times to make sure the words weren't going to rearrange themselves. Then I found Kendra by the register. Kendra. I kept my voice level. The plaque out front. She turned. Her smile didn't drop. It just adjusted, the way a camera adjusts when the light changes. Isn't the brass gorgeous? Dennis found the guy. My name's not on it. Oh, she said. And here's the thing, friend. She said it at exactly the volume where the 4 people nearest us could hear, which I've come to believe was not an accident. Dad. Walt. The plaque is a brand element. It's about the story we're telling. She glanced down at my hands. My knuckles. The scars. The nails that don't come clean. And honestly, the investors are photographing the front all morning. You'll photograph better in the back. A man behind her found something fascinating to look at in the middle distance. A woman took a very long sip of her mimosa. My jaw locked up. I looked past Kendra to my son. Marcus was standing 4 feet away. 4 feet. Close enough that I could see the little muscle jump in his cheek. He was holding a champagne flute and talking to Dennis Halloran about parking, and he did not turn around. He heard it. I have never once in my life been unsure about whether my son heard something. He heard it, and he kept his back to me, and he kept talking about parking. I breathed out through my nose the way I used to when a new kid dropped a full sheet pan of croissants on the floor. Keep it steady, Walt. Don't make it worse. Then Kendra reached under the counter and came up with a hairnet and a lanyard. Here, she said, holding them out like she was doing me a kindness. Health code, and it'll help people know who to ask. The lanyard said staff back entrance only. I looked at those 2 things in her hand for about 3 seconds. And then I did something that I have replayed maybe 400 times since, and I still believe it was right. I took the hairnet. I put it on, and I did not take the lanyard. I'll work, I said. I'm not going to hide. She blinked. Just once. It wasn't the reaction she'd budgeted for. Then she said, "Great," in a bright voice, and turned to greet somebody. And I walked back through my own kitchen and put my bakery box on the top of the walk-in where nobody would move it, and I started pulling trays. For the next 2 hours I worked. I baked off 400 rolls and refilled the case 11 times, and I did it well, because I don't know how to do it any other way. And in those 2 hours, 3 things happened. The first was Nora. She came and stood in the kitchen doorway in her yellow dress, and she'd seen it. Kids see everything, and they don't have the equipment yet to pretend otherwise. She looked at the hairnet on my head, and her mouth went tight and small, and she looked down at her shoes. That hurt worse than the plaque did. The second was Kendra, out front, giving what amounted to a tour to a cluster of people, including the woman from the food magazine. I was 10 feet away restocking the case, and I heard her clear as a bell. The build-out was the hardest part, she said. You cannot find real craftsmanship anymore. My father-in-law knows a few guys, thankfully. Knows a few guys. I set the tray down flat so I wouldn't set it down hard. And the third thing happened at 11:50. A man came up to the case, 60, maybe. Well-fed, friendly-faced, a Rotary Club pin on his lapel. He looked at me the way people look at somebody they've decided is furniture with a pulse. I have to tell you, he said warmly, the bread here is outstanding. You've been going all morning. What's an outfit like this pay for a shift like today? And my mouth opened. Everything was right there. I don't get paid. I'm the father. That oven, that floor, that counter you're leaning on, I paid for all of it, and I sanded that counter on my knees. And then Kendra was there. She has a gift for arriving exactly when a conversation needs managing. Oh, don't worry about him. She laughed light, easy, the way you laugh at a harmless little joke. He doesn't need to be paid. He's happiest when he's got something to do. The man chuckled uncertainly and looked at me, and something in his face changed a little, and he moved off toward the coffee. And friend, I want to tell you what happened inside me right then, because it wasn't rage. Rage would have been easier. It was more like a floor giving out that long, slow sensation of standing on something you'd trusted for years and feeling it finally quit. I reached up and took the hairnet off my head. I folded it once, the way you fold a towel you're done with, and I set it on the pass-through shelf. I turned off the deck oven. Because I'm not the kind of man who leaves an oven on in a building full of people. I pulled the last tray, set it on the rack, and squared it up with the edge. Then I went and got my bakery box off the top of the walk-in, and I walked out through my own kitchen. Kendra said something behind me. Her voice had changed registers from hostess to something with an edge on it. I kept moving. I was almost to the side door when I heard small sneakers on concrete. Grandpa. Nora was standing in the hallway holding a paper plate with both hands. On it was a slice of the lemon almond cake the caterer had brought, and she'd covered it with a napkin so it would stay nice. Her eyes were red at the corners. Not crying the kind of red that means you've been holding something in a while and your body is starting to lose the argument. You didn't eat anything, she said. Her voice was very small and very steady, the way kids' voices get when they're trying to be older than they are. I saved you some. My throat closed so fast it hurt. I crouched down in front of her, and my knees had opinions the whole way, and I took the plate. Thank you, sweetheart. That was real thoughtful. Are you leaving? Yeah. I straightened up. I think I've done what I came to do. She wrapped her arms around my waist and pressed her face into my shirt, and I put my hand on the back of her head and held her there for a count of 5, feeling how thin her shoulders were and how much I loved her and how badly this day had gone. You're the best baker in the world, she said into my shirt. And you're the best kid, I said back. Don't let anybody tell you different. I went out the side door into the September morning. Marcus was on the sidewalk with 2 of his friends, laughing at something, and when he saw me with the box and the plate, he came off the curb fast. Dad, wait, where are you going? Home, Marcus. Don't do this. Not today. I stopped and turned around and looked at my son, my firstborn. The boy I pulled out of a ditch on Lorraine Avenue at 2 in the morning when he was 17 and never told his mother about, the man I'd handed my whole life's work to in a folder with tabs in it. I looked at him long enough to make sure he understood that I could see him clearly. Every choice he'd made that morning, every word he hadn't said. Then I got in my truck. I sat there a second before I started it. The plate of cake was on the passenger seat, Rose's seat. I put my hand flat on the bakery box beside me and felt the weight of what was inside it. In the mirror, Marcus was still standing on the sidewalk. He didn't come after me. He just stood there getting smaller. And somewhere on Detroit Avenue, driving with both hands on the wheel and no radio, my mind kept circling back to a phone number I've had memorized for 30 years. Ruth Feingold. Now, before I tell you what Ruth found when I sat down in her office 2 days later, and I need you to understand that it changed everything, including who actually held the power in this whole arrangement, I want to know if you're still here with me. If you have ever been handed a hairnet, an apron, a mop, a folding chair, or a job in a room that you paid for, do me a favor. Type the word hairnet in the comments. Just that one word, nothing else. It tells me you're out there. And honestly, friend, after telling you all that, I could use the company. One more thing before we go on. What comes next gets heavier, not lighter. If you'd rather step off here, no hard feelings at all, you take care of yourself first. But if you're staying, sit tight, because what my son and his wife did not know was about to cost them everything they had. Ruth's office is on the 9th floor of a building downtown with brass elevator doors and carpet so thick it eats sound. She had coffee waiting, which I've learned over 30 years is her way of giving a man something to hold before she gives him something harder. Let's start with what you know, she said, and opened a folder that was thicker than I wanted it to be. We went through the note. $240,000, secured by equipment. First payment due in month 13, no payment ever made. You're a secured creditor in default, she said. That's not a feeling, Walter. That's a position. Then she pulled out the second thing. When their counsel sent me the equipment schedule for the UCC filing last spring, they included the financing package. They wanted my sign-off on the lien priority. She turned a page around toward me. I want you to look at the signature block. It was a financing agreement. $95,000 for a rack oven, a retarder, and a display case. 12%. And at the bottom, on the line marked personal guarantor, was my name. My name and my signature. The way I loop the W, the way the little tail comes off the O in Serrano and curls back. 41 years of signing invoices the exact same way because my father taught me to sign like a man who means it. I had never seen that document in my life. That's not mine, I said. My voice came out wrong. Ruth, I never signed this. I know, she said. That's precisely what I was afraid you'd say. I sat there and looked at it a long while, long enough that my coffee went from hot to cold to something I wasn't going to drink. How? Ruth folded her hands. Last year, during the build-out, Marcus emailed you some documents to sign. Insurance certificates, a W-9, a health department form. You signed them at the library and sent them back, because he said he'd file them. He extracted your signature as an image file, she said. Then applied it to this. Under Ohio law and under the Federal E-Sign Act, an electronic signature carries the same weight as ink, which means misusing one carries the same consequences. Walter, I need you to hear me clearly. This is not a gray area. This is forgery. I pushed back from her desk. Not to leave, just to get a breath's worth of room. My son, who fell asleep on my chest during ball games, whose first bookshelf I built out of pine and wood glue when he was 5 and could not have cared less about bookshelves. He used my name, I said, and my voice came out scraped. He used my name to borrow money I didn't know about. Yes, Ruth said. No decoration on it. There's more, she said. March of this year, a transfer of $26,000 from your account, memo line equipment, deposit shortfall. I remembered. Kendra had called me on a Sunday night, voice tight, saying the equipment vendor had moved on them and they were short and they'd lose the delivery slot. I sent it Monday morning. Out of the account I keep for the surgery I know is coming on my shoulder and the one I don't know about yet. That's my medical money, I said. Ruth's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. Has any of it come back? I laughed. It came out short and ugly and had nothing to do with anything being funny. No, she let that sit. Then she said, There's one more item. and I want you to have your coffee in your hands for it. She slid across a third document. It was a draft, not filed, drafted. A petition for guardianship of the person and estate of Walter A. Serrano, prepared by a firm in Independence, listing Marcus Serrano as proposed guardian, citing concerns regarding diminished capacity and susceptibility to financial mismanagement. It was dated 11 days before the grand opening. I read it 3 times before the words would go in. They were going to have me declared incompetent, I said. That appears to be what was contemplated, Ruth said carefully. Nothing was filed. A draft is not an action, but a draft is intent, and intent has a date on it. And the date is before the day they asked you to hand them a check for $310,000. I got up and went to her window. 9 floors down, Cleveland was doing what Cleveland does on a Wednesday. People walking, people carrying coffee, people with ordinary problems, none of which were this. 11 days before, she was still calling me Dad in that warm voice, 11 days before. Under Ohio's elder financial exploitation statutes, Ruth said behind me, a documented plan to improperly control the assets of a person 60 or older is significant. Combined with the forged guarantee and the diverted medical funds, this establishes a pattern. Any judge would take it seriously. I nodded. I couldn't do much else. What do I do? Tonight? Nothing, she said. Go home. Eat something. Sleep if it'll come. She came and stood beside me, not close enough to crowd. Tomorrow, I send notice. And Walter, you didn't do one thing wrong. Not one. I drove home in the middle of the afternoon with a folder on the seat and a kind of tired in me that had nothing to do with work. That night, I went upstairs and stood in front of the door I hadn't opened in a long time. Rosa's sewing room. She died 4 years ago, and I still hadn't touched it. I sat down on the little chair by the window and looked around at the fabric she never got to use, and the pincushion shaped like a tomato, and on the shelf, her recipe notebook. Green cloth cover, spine gone soft. 43 years of her handwriting and mine mixed together. Flour weights, hydration percentages. A note in the margin that said, W, stop overproofing the rye. I mean it. I sat with it in my lap and turned the pages the way you do when you're not really reading. And inside the back cover, tucked behind the flap where she kept the loose cards, there was an envelope with my name on it in her handwriting. Walter. My heart came up into my throat. I opened it slow. Walt. I've been sitting on this a while, trying to figure out whether to say it to your face or leave it where you'll find it when you're ready. You're a smart man. You've always been a smart man. You just love so hard it fogs up your glasses. I want to talk to you about Marcus. He doesn't call you when he misses you. He calls you when he needs something. I'm not saying he doesn't love you. I believe he does, in the shape he's able to. But there's a kind of love that only knocks when it's hungry, and that is not the same as what you've earned. You keep telling yourself the next thing will do it. The next loan, the next Saturday, the next time you fix something before he asks. You think you're building closeness. Honey, you're renting it, and the rent goes up every year. So, listen to me. You deserve to walk into a room and have people be glad it's you, not glad it's you carrying something. You deserve to be thanked without immediately being asked. Don't give away the bakery. Don't give away the money we set aside for your body, because your body is going to need it, and you are not as young as you insist you are at 3 in the morning. And if you ever find yourself standing in a room full of people who make you feel like the least important person in it, please remember the room is wrong, not you. All my love, now and from wherever I've gotten to, Rosa. I sat in that little chair until the room went dark around me and I didn't get up to turn on a light. She'd written that before the folder with the tabs, before the plaque, before the hairnet, before my son stood 4 feet away and talked about parking. She hadn't known any of the specifics, and she'd described all of them exactly. You knew, I said out loud, to the pincushion, to the fabric, to 43 years. You knew, and you left me the map anyway. They came on a Saturday, 6 days later. Because Ruth's notice went out Tuesday, and people like my son don't answer a lawyer's letter with a phone call. They answer in person. Because in person they can use their faces. I made them sit on the couch, and I took the chair across from them. And I'd thought about that arrangement in advance the same way I think about the order of a bake. Dad, we owe you an apology for the opening, Marcus said, hands clasped, leaning forward, delivering something he'd clearly practiced in the car. For what, specifically? He blinked. What? Name it, Marcus. Specifically, some things came across differently than I intended, Kendra said, sliding in smooth as water, finding a crack. It was an incredibly stressful morning, and I was managing 100 moving pieces. Is that an apology? Her jaw tightened by about a millimeter. I'm giving you context, Walter. I see. I picked up my water, drank some, set it down. Go ahead. Marcus cleared his throat. The thing is, the lease renewal option comes up at the end of the month, and the landlord needs the guarantee reaffirmed, and we need your... No. One word. Flat as a cooled sheet pan. Dad. I said no. Kendra sat forward and the composed face came off like a lid. Do you understand what you're doing? 40 people work in that building. You're going to put Nora's college fund on the street because your feelings got hurt at a party. Don't. It came out sharp enough that she stopped. I leaned in and looked at her directly, for the first time since she'd handed me that hairnet. Whatever's happening between us, that little girl's name stays out of your mouth in my house. Her chin came up and her eyes went flat, and I understood then that the warmth had always been a tool she picked up when she needed it. Everything goes through Ruth now, I said. Marcus stood up, and there was a desperate current running through him. Dad, please, just reaffirm the guarantee. We'll fix everything else after, I swear to you. I stood up too. At 68, I'm still tall enough to look my son in the eye, and I made sure I did. The last time you swore to me, I said quietly, you swore $26,000 would be back in 6 months. Before that, you swore the paperwork was routine. Your promises have a pattern, son. I finally learned to read it. His face did something complicated and painful, and I didn't have the heart to watch all of it. Kendra picked up her bag. This isn't over. I know, I said. It rarely is. At the door, Marcus turned around, and for a second his face was the face of a 9-year-old. Dad, I'm sorry. I really am. I believe you're sorry, I said. I don't know yet if you're sorry for the right things. And I closed the door. Here's what happened over the following 7 weeks. And I'll tell it plain, because plain is how it actually happens. There's no courtroom scene. There's no moment where somebody gets what's coming to them in front of a crowd. It's paper, and paper is slower and much, much heavier. Ruth delivered the guarantee withdrawal to the landlord on a Monday. 30-day cure. The landlord's counsel called her within the hour, and the tenant was given until the end of the month to substitute security, a letter of credit, a cash deposit equal to 12 months' rent, or a new guarantor with a comparable balance sheet. Dennis and Priscilla Halloran were asked. Dennis's attorney sent back 3 paragraphs of careful language that added up to, we made no financial commitments, and would appreciate our name being removed from all materials. They took the plaque down in October. Nora told me about it. She said her mother did it herself with a screwdriver and didn't say anything the whole time. The equipment financer, once Ruth put a sworn affidavit in front of them stating that the guarantee bore a signature I never made, moved fast, not against me, against the LLC. A forged guarantee makes the whole instrument a problem, and lenders do not like problems. They accelerated. The forgery itself we resolved civilly, without criminal charges. Ruth advised that path, and I took her advice. Marcus cooperated fully, signed everything she put in front of him, and admitted it in writing. I thought about the other road for about 4 days. Then I thought about a little girl in a yellow dress, with her cardigan buttoned wrong, and I let it go. Some doors, once you've walked through them, you don't need to leave burning behind you. They closed on the 2nd Saturday of November, 14 months after opening. The equipment went back to the financer, except the pieces my note was secured against the deck oven, the mixer, the walk-in, those came to me. Ruth handled the release. And Kendra's business, after the landlord took the deposit and the vendors got in line, netted them somewhere around $9,000. $9,000. Out of 310 of mine, plus 7 months of my knees, plus a bakery on Warren Road with my name over the door for 41 years. I'd like to tell you I felt triumphant. I didn't. I stood in my kitchen the day Ruth called, and I felt about 80 years old, and I put my hand on the counter and I said, Rosita. I about gave them the whole thing, And then I said, not anymore. There's one more part, and it's the part that matters. In late October, before the closing, a man named Dominic Alvarez left me a voicemail. Dom's 65. He's run a wholesale bakery in Parma for 30-some years, and we'd known each other since the 80s. The way tradesmen know each other, no socializing. Complete respect. Walt, it's Alvarez. I'm looking to get out by spring, and I've got a situation. Call me. His situation was this. He wanted to sell, his kids didn't want it, and he had 6 employees, 3 of them over 20 years, and he was not going to hand them to somebody who'd clear the room and hire cheaper. I drove out that afternoon. Low brick building, gravel lot, 2 loading docks, and inside the smell. You know the one. Yeast and hot sugar and the dry warmth of a place where the ovens have been running since before your kids were born. 6 people working. One of them looked up, nodded once, and went back to it. That nod told me everything I needed to know about what Dom had built. He walked me through the books, the routes, the maintenance logs, the lease with 8 years left. When we came back around to the front, I asked what he wanted for it. He told me, and the number sat there between us, and it was very close to what was in a bakery box on the top shelf of my closet, a check I had never cashed, never handed over, and never quite been able to put back in the bank. Give me a week, I said. We shook on it. I signed in December. When it was done, Dom reached into his shirt pocket and put a key on the table and slid it over. Old brass, worn smooth, the bow rounded off from 40 years of thumbs. Take care of my people, he said. I will. 3 days after that, I met my son at a coffee place on Lorraine. He was already there, both hands around a cup he hadn't drunk. He looked like a man who hadn't been sleeping, which I recognized because I'd looked the same way through most of October. He stood up when I came in. Didn't try to hug me. That was the right instinct. Dad, he said, I don't have the right to ask you for anything. I know that. He pressed his lips together hard. I just needed to say I'm sorry. Not for one thing, for all of it. The signature. Your medical money. That paper Ruth found. His voice broke clean down the middle. And for standing there at the opening and not saying one word. I knew what she was doing. I knew. And I let it happen because I didn't want the fight. That makes me worse than her in some ways. You working? He blinked. Interview Thursday. Facilities coordinator at a hospital system. It's a long way down from where I was. Is it honest work? Yes. Then take it. Do it well. And don't ever put anything on a form that isn't true again. He gave a short, raw laugh that had more pain in it than humor. No, I won't. I bought Alvarez's place in Parma, I said. 6 people. I start Monday. Something moved across his face. Surprise. Then something warmer. Dad, is there a way back? Between us? I set my cup down and looked at him straight. There's a table, I said. There's always a table, but a seat at it isn't yours because your last name matches mine. You earn it the same way anybody earns it. You show up, you tell the truth, and you do the thing you said you'd do. I paused. The door's not locked, son. It's just not propped open anymore. He nodded, and his jaw worked hard, and he pressed the back of his hand against his mouth, the way he's done since he was 4, when he didn't want anybody to watch his face fall apart. Outside on the sidewalk, he put his hand out, not for a hug, just his hand. I shook it, the way you shake a man's hand when the history between you is complicated enough that everything simpler has already burned off. On Christmas Eve, Nora came to the shop in Parma with her dad, and she had something in her coat pocket wrapped in a paper napkin, folded twice and taped shut with the seriousness of a kid who's been planning it for weeks. Inside was a recipe card, Rosa's handwriting. Serrano rye, 3rd proof, cold overnight, don't rush it. The corner was torn and there was a coffee ring on it. Mom was throwing out the boxes from the store, Nora said, watching my face. That was in the dumpster. I got it out. She thought about it. It shouldn't have been in there. I could not talk for a second. My hands were shaking around that little card, still warm from her pocket, and my eyes were burning so hard I had to look at the ceiling and breathe through my nose until I could trust my face. Thank you, sweetheart. I finally got out, and it came out wrecked, and I didn't try to fix it. I walked over to the long table in the middle of that shop, 12 feet of beat-up maple, where Dom's crew has eaten lunch every day for 30 years, and I taped that card to the wall above the head of it, where the light hits in the morning. Grandpa, Nora said. Who sits there? Anybody who comes in with something real, I said. Hunger, honesty, a willingness to work. I looked at her across the table. Not anybody who thinks having my last name is enough of a reason. She thought that over with the seriousness 8-year-olds bring to things that matter to them. Then she nodded once and went back to her hot chocolate. She comes Saturdays now. No conditions, no speeches. She just comes. So that's the whole of it, friend. I'm 68 years old. I lost a wife, and I lost the version of my son I'd made up in my head, and I lost a year of sleep, and I very nearly lost $310,000 in the roof I'm sitting under. What I got instead was a key on my ring, 6 people who show up at 4:30 in the morning, and a coffee-stained recipe card that a little girl pulled out of a dumpster because she didn't think it belonged in there. Here's what I want you to carry out of this, if you carry anything. You cannot buy dignity in installments. You cannot earn your way to a seat at a table that was never built with you in mind. And no amount of money, no amount of Saturdays, no amount of quietly making yourself useful is ever going to make somebody value what they've already decided they're entitled to. If I could go back and say one thing to the man standing in that kitchen with a hairnet on his head, it would be this. Don't shrink yourself down into usefulness. Don't confuse being needed with being loved. Don't stand there waiting for somebody else to pull a chair out for you. Build the table yourself. Then fill it with people who came for you and not for what you were carrying. I'm not a man who talks much about faith, but I do believe the good Lord has a way of shutting doors that were never ours, so our hands come free to build the ones that are. Family justice hardly ever looks like a courtroom. Sometimes it's just a signature withdrawn, an oven that comes home, and a kid on a Saturday morning learning to shape a loaf. That's what I'd call it, done right. Not tearing down, building. If any of this landed on you, if you've ever been handed a hairnet when you'd earned a seat, leave me a comment and tell me where you were standing when it happened. Share this with somebody who needs to hear it tonight. And if you haven't subscribed, well, the next story's already proofing. Thank you for staying to the end. It means more than you know. Some of what's coming carries fictional elements shaped to make a point worth making. If that's not for you, no hard feelings at all. But if you're staying, I'm real glad you're here.